Attack of the Cybermen was the first story of Doctor Who Season 22, and was broadcast almost exactly 40 years ago. It's notable for being the first season to have 45-minute long episodes, 20 years before they became the norm for the show. I suspect the scripts may have been written in the usual style, and they just stuck each pair of episodes together before they were broadcast, as the Cybermen first show up halfway through part 1, which would have been the first cliffhanger if it had been 4 episodes long. And they went back to the old style in the following series, so it can't have caught on, but at least it makes this season stand out. The first episode is by far the strongest, bringing back Maurice Colborne as Lytton from Resurrection of the Daleks. I remember having no memory of who he was the first time I saw this, so he can't have made much of an impression on me the first time round. It could be because he's gone from being a policeman to being a gangster. And there's some impressive shots of central London as he drives around putting his crew together. One of them is Terry Malloy as Russell, completely unrecognisable after playing Davros, and another is Brian Glover as Burroughs. He's one of the best parts about this story, coming out with some great one-liners, like when Lytton reveals he's from another planet, and Burroughs says, "You said you come from Fulham!" There hasn't been much humour in the show since Tom Baker left, so it's great to see it creeping back in. Meanwhile, in the TARDIS, Perry is changed into a pink spandex outfit, which is just as garish as what the Doctor's wearing, but somehow a lot easier on the eye. The Doctor is still unstable, but he promises not to hurt her. "He just tried to strangle her last week. Get out of there, that is a toxic relationship." There is a half-hearted attempt to fix the chameleon circuit, so the TARDIS changes shape a few times during this story, but in the end it goes back to being a police box. It feels like a bit of a waste and doesn't really affect the story. They could have done a lot more with the idea, like had the TARDIS change into something valuable and get stolen. As it is, it just feels a bit pointless. And so is the TARDIS landing in Totter's Lane, which is never mentioned in dialogue and looks completely different to all the other times we see it. At least it leaves the field open for its proper return in remembrance of the Daleks just a few years later. There are some effective scenes in the sewers. Doctor Who always does good tunnel scenes, and these ones are dark enough to be quite convincing. The Cybermen show up. At least one of them is jet black, which makes sense for a stealth situation. It does make you wonder why Cybermen usually stick to the same old silver. It would be a lot more exciting if they keep bringing them back in different colours, like the Daleks. It's not entirely clear what these Cybermen are doing on Earth in the first place. If they'd mentioned they were left over from the invasion, it might have made more sense, but there's more than enough continuity references in this story as it is. The Cybermen somehow board the TARDIS, even though it's locked and doesn't even look like a blue box anymore, so I'm not sure how they even knew it was the TARDIS in the first place. And the action moves to Telos, for the first time since Tomb of the Cybermen. There are some great action scenes here, as we follow 2 human slaves desperately trying to escape from the Cybermen. In the end, the whole plotline seems a bit pointless, as they all end up dead, but it's very exciting while it lasts. We also meet the Cryons, the original inhabitants of Telos, who are all female. I'm not sure how that works biologically. They are all quite striking, with seductive voices and come-hither hand movements, but their faces look like they're covered in cling film, and they have long moustaches as well, which is not nearly as attractive. The Cryons are played by some well-known TV personalities of the time, such as Faith Brown and Sarah Green, but it's very hard to tell which is which. It's also hard to see why they cast Michael Kilgareth as the Cyber Controller. He did play the part in Tomb of the Cybermen, but there is absolutely no way of telling that it's the same person. They could have cast literally anyone and got the same performance. The Cyber plan is to go back in time and smash Halley's Comet into Earth, a bit like the movie Armageddon, but in reverse. It kind of makes sense, as Halley's Comet was due in 1986, and the 10th Planet was also set in 1986. So you can see what they were going for, but there's only one brief shot of Halley's Comet, and you see nothing of Mondas, so it all feels very theoretical. It might have worked better if they just waited until 1986 and just done a straight sequel to the 10th Planet instead. Lytton turns out to have been working for the Cryons all along. I'm not sure what his plan was, as he would have been stuck on Earth if the Doctor hadn't shown up. He's rather brutally tortured by the Cybermen, with blood oozing out of his hands, which is a bit much by any standards, let alone for tea time on a Saturday. Mary Whitehouse might have had a point about that one. The Doctor tries to save him, but fails utterly, and ends up killing a load of Cybermen instead. It's a very violent story. Just about every character dies except for some of the Cryons. But all of the action scenes do look great, as Matthew Robertson is back after doing similarly strong work in Resurrection of the Daleks. It's just a shame he never came back to the series. At the end, the Doctor is left ruining his mistrust of Lytton and vowing to change his ways. It's a little unfair, as he barely interacted with Lytton in Resurrection of the Daleks. If they'd had a few more scenes back then, their relationship might have had more weight. But still, it's good to see the Doctor admitting he was wrong for once. It makes the character feel a bit more rounded. The DVD has about an hour of extras. There's a few more bits and pieces on the Blu-ray, but I'll do a separate video looking through all the Blu-ray exclusives at the end of the season. The Cold War is a solid half-hour documentary with all the cast and crew, with all of them praising the director and the guest stars and criticising the violence and the Cryons. The Cyber Story is a look through all of the Cybermen stories up to that point, with clips and interviews from the archives. And The Human Cyborg is a little documentary about Kevin Warwick, who is a real-life robotic scientist who is trying to become a human cyborg himself. But as far as I can tell, he hasn't got that far since the documentary was made. Overall, the script is a bit disjointed, with a lot of plot holes, but the direction and the guest stars make it very watchable. I'll give it 6 out of 10. And next week it's Vengeance on Varos, which is even more violent, but still it's one of my favourite Sixth Doctor stories. So I look forward to seeing that again. Press subscribe if you want to see what I think of it now, and I'll see you next time.